The whisper started in the marble halls of Florence, then drifted across the entire Italian peninsula. They spoke of the Medici not just as bankers or rulers, but as something more. They spoke of a secret hand, unseen, unheard, always pulling strings. The Medici built their empire on gold and steel, yes, but also on a network of shadows, on secrets gathered and whispered. These are the stories of 8 of their most daring agents, the invisible guardians of a dynasty. Number 8, Pietro, the Iron Hand Lombardi. Pietro Lombardi was not the kind of agent who slipped through darkened alleys or decrypted ancient scrolls. He was a force, a solution, a shadow cast by the very sun. His reputation preceded him, a quiet hum of respect and a tremor of fear. Born into a family of skilled artisans in the Oltrarno district of Florence, Pietro had learned early that true strength lay not just in brute force, but in unwavering loyalty and a keen understanding of human weaknesses. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Il Magnifico, recognized this potential during a chaotic street brawl, seeing in young Pietro not just a fighter but a strategist. Pietro became indispensable, a trusted enforcer, and eventually the head of a small, discreet unit tasked with securing the Medici's interests when subtlety failed. He operated within the gray areas of Florentine law, ensuring the family's reach extended beyond the gilded gates of their palazzo. One of Pietro's most significant missions took place during the volatile years following the Pazzi conspiracy of 1478. The attempt on Lorenzo's life had plunged Florence into chaos and ignited a bitter war with the Papal States and Naples. Lorenzo, injured but alive, needed to consolidate power and eliminate remaining threats, both external and internal. A particular thorn in his side was the continued support for the Pazzi remnants from some powerful Florentine families, and, crucially, from a prominent condottiero, Roberto da Sanseverino. Sanseverino, a mercenary captain of considerable renown, had been subtly undermining Medici authority, allowing agents of Pope Sixtus IV to move relatively freely within Florentine territory, supplying information to the papal forces. His neutrality was a dangerous facade. Lorenzo could not afford a direct military confrontation with Sanseverino's formidable forces without weakening Florence's position against Rome and Naples. Pietro was summoned to a private audience with Lorenzo. The room was sparse, save for a single table upon which lay maps of Tuscany and intelligence reports from various sources. Lorenzo, still recovering from his wounds, leaned forward. He spoke of Sanseverino's strategic importance, his known avarice, and his ambition. The condottiero had recently captured a small, fortified town near Siena, a neutral territory, claiming it for himself despite Medici claims. This blatant act of defiance could not stand. Lorenzo's instruction to Pietro was clear. Sanseverino must be removed from the board, his alliance with the Papal States broken, and the town secured, all without a single Florentine soldier raising a blade in open battle. A tall order for a man of force. Pietro understood the layers of the challenge. Sanseverino was well protected, his camp a fortress, and his personal guard fiercely loyal. An assassination was too risky, potentially drawing the ire of other mercenary captains and creating a martyr. Open attack was forbidden. Pietro dispatched his own trusted network of informants, not to gather battlefield intelligence, but to delve into Sanseverino's personal life, his habits, his vulnerabilities. Within days, a curious pattern emerged. Sanseverino, for all his martial prowess, harbored a deep-seated fear of illness, especially a recurring fever that had plagued him since childhood. He was also known to be deeply superstitious, consulting astrologers and alchemists. Pietro formulated a plan that was both audacious and precise. He infiltrated Sanseverino's camp under the guise of a merchant seeking to sell rare spices and exotic goods from the east. He brought with him a carefully selected team, not of fighters, but of individuals with specialized skills. One was a former apothecary, knowledgeable in the properties of rare plants and their effects on the human body, without leaving a trace. Another was a master illusionist capable of creating subtle but unsettling effects. The third was a discreet individual with an uncanny ability to mimic voices. The apothecary, posing as Pietro's assistant, subtly introduced a harmless, tasteless substance into Sanseverino's evening wine during a feigned trade negotiation. This substance, derived from a rare local herb, mimicked the onset of his childhood fever, causing sudden chills, profuse sweating, and a disorienting sensation without actual illness. As the condottiero succumbed to the manufactured symptoms, the illusionist, working in the shadows of the camp, used finely crafted mirrors and strategically placed lanterns to create fleeting ghostly figures around Sanseverino's tent, figures that seemed to whisper his name. The voice mimic, positioned out of sight, amplified these whispers with distorted, echoing phrases about ill omens and impending doom. Sanseverino, already weakened and superstitious, was terrified. He believed he was cursed, that his fever was a sign of divine wrath for his betrayal of Florence, or perhaps for his recent aggressive territorial expansion. He dismissed his doctors, seeking solace in his astrologers who, having been subtly influenced by Pietro's agents with carefully planted omens, confirmed his fears. They spoke of a powerful celestial alignment that demanded immediate penance and withdrawal from conflict. The very next morning, Sanseverino, citing a sudden and severe illness and a vision, announced his immediate withdrawal from the contested town and his renunciation of any claims against Florence. He disbanded his forces and retired to his private estates, convinced that continuing the war would bring about his ultimate demise. The town was quietly reoccupied by Florentine patrols within the week. Sanseverino's abrupt retreat created a ripple effect, disrupting papal supply lines and undermining the morale of their allies. The papal legates in Florence, expecting Sanseverino's continued assistance, were left scrambling for new strategies, creating a crucial window of opportunity for Lorenzo to consolidate his political standing. Pietro Lombardi had achieved the impossible, disarming a powerful enemy without a single drop of Medici blood spilled on the battlefield, securing vital territory and proving that sometimes the hand of iron was best used for subtle, shattering blows to the mind. The true cost of this mission was known only to a few, and the Medici's influence in the region quietly strengthened, a silent testament to the efficacy of the Iron Hand. Number 7. Costanza the Serpent Donati. Costanza Donati moved through the glittering courts of Italy like a silent predator. Her beauty was undeniable, her wit sharp, and her lineage impeccable, a distant offshoot of an old Florentine noble family, albeit one whose fortunes had waned. The Medici, ever astute, recognized her potential not for marriage alliances, but for something far more valuable, her ability to penetrate the highest echelons of power. Costanza was not a spy who dealt in overt information gathering or decryption. Her expertise lay in psychological manipulation, in planting seeds of doubt, in subtly shifting loyalties, and in creating chaos from within. She was the serpent in the garden, and her venom was often unseen until its effects were irreversible. Her most infamous mission, whispered about in hushed tones centuries later through fragmented letters and private archives, involved the court of Ercole I d'Este, Duke of Ferrara. Ferrara was a key player in the delicate balance of power in the Italian peninsula, often caught between the influence of Milan, Venice, and the Papal States. While often allied with Florence, Ercole was known for his indecisiveness and his susceptibility to flattery and political intrigue. In the late 1480s, whispers reached Lorenzo de' Medici that Ercole was contemplating a secret alliance with Ludovico Sforza, the ambitious regent of Milan, an alliance that could gravely threaten Florentine trade routes and political stability in Tuscany. The Sforza-Este axis, if solidified, would create a formidable bloc that could isolate Florence. Lorenzo's instruction to Costanza was not to gather proof of this alliance, but to prevent it from ever being signed. Her target was not Ercole directly, but his most trusted advisor, a shrewd diplomat named Messer Aldobrandi. Aldobrandi was fiercely loyal to Ferrara, deeply nationalistic and wary of any foreign power gaining too much influence. He was also a man of considerable pride and a patron of the arts, particularly fond of rare manuscripts and classical poetry. Costanza arrived in Ferrara under the guise of a visiting noblewoman seeking artistic patronage for a struggling Florentine painter, a distant cousin, she claimed. Her true mission began immediately. She charmed her way into the ducal court, her exquisite gowns and elegant manner drawing attention. She made sure to subtly cross paths with Aldobrandi at various court functions, at first merely exchanging polite pleasantries. She never seemed overtly interested in politics, instead focusing on discussions of art, philosophy, and classical literature, subjects she knew Aldobrandi held dear. As their conversations grew longer, Costanza began to weave her web. She spoke of the political landscape not directly, but through allegories and historical examples. She would casually mention a hypothetical scenario where a proud independent state like Ferrara, in its pursuit of fleeting alliances, might find itself inadvertently subservient to a more dominant power. She spoke of the subtle ways in which one state's interests could slowly become intertwined with another's, leading to a loss of sovereignty. She never named Milan or Sforza, but her words conjured images of powerful, ambitious neighbors. Costanza observed Aldobrandi's reactions, noting his slight frowns when she described historical instances of powerful rulers using smaller states as pawns. She discovered Aldobrandi's particular aversion to Ludovico Sforza's reputation for Machiavellian cunning and his ruthless ambition. She decided to exploit this. During one particularly captivating evening of court entertainment, where a troupe of Florentine actors performed a play she had subtly influenced, a character, a cunning advisor, spoke lines that mirrored Sforza's known tactics, a character subtly hinting at using others for personal gain, then discarding them. Aldobrandi was seen to shift uncomfortably in his seat. A week later, Costanza orchestrated a chance encounter with Aldobrandi in the ducal library, where she pretended to be searching for a rare edition of Seneca. She then discovered a crumpled, seemingly discarded letter near a stack of Milanese correspondences. The letter was a masterful forgery crafted by Marco Valerius, another Medici agent. It was addressed to an unknown Milanese official, and its contents, though vague, suggested that Ludovico Sforza considered Ferrara a mere stepping stone, a means to an end in his larger ambitions. The letter also contained subtly insulting remarks about Ercole d'Este's indecisiveness and Aldobrandi's perceived naivety, hinting that Sforza viewed the Ferrarese court as easily manipulated. Costanza feigned shock and embarrassment at having found such a document, quickly apologizing and moving to discard it. Aldobrandi, his curiosity piqued and his pride stung by the implied insult, insisted on reading it. He saw the discarded letter as a true insight, a glimpse behind Sforza's polished facade. The seemingly careless discovery, the casual manner in which Costanza presented it, lent it an air of authenticity that a more overt presentation would have lacked. The vague insults and the strategic implications resonated deeply with Aldobrandi's existing suspicions about Sforza's ambitions. The effect was profound. Aldobrandi, deeply wounded by the perceived insults and convinced of Sforza's duplicity, immediately began to argue vehemently against the Milanese alliance to Duke Ercole. He presented his arguments with such conviction, fueled by his bruised pride and a newly ignited distrust, that he swayed the indecisive Duke. The treaty, which had been on the verge of being signed, was indefinitely postponed, then quietly abandoned. Ferrara remained an independent entity, its strategic position secured, and a dangerous anti-Florentine axis was averted. Costanza, her mission complete, gracefully departed Ferrara a few weeks later, leaving behind only the memory of her captivating presence and the quiet disintegration of a critical alliance. The Medici had not needed to send an army, they had merely sent a serpent to whisper. Number 6, Brother Anselm the Silent Scribe. Brother Anselm lived a life of quiet devotion within the stone walls of the Dominican monastery of San Marco in Florence. His days were spent illuminating manuscripts, copying ancient texts, and assisting in the monastery's extensive library. His demeanor was humble, his eyes downcast, and his movements slow and deliberate. No one would ever suspect him of being a key intelligence asset for the most powerful family in Florence. Yet, Brother Anselm possessed an extraordinary memory, an acute ear for stray words, and an unparalleled ability to observe without being noticed. His piety was his perfect cover. He was a master at understanding the silent language of parchment and ink, of deciphering the true meaning behind official pronouncements and private correspondence. His most challenging mission came when Venice, a formidable maritime power and a frequent rival of Florence, began to subtly restrict Florentine merchant access to their lucrative eastern trade routes. The Venetian Republic, ever jealous of its commercial supremacy, imposed escalating tariffs and created bureaucratic hurdles, effectively stifling Florentine silk and wool exports to the Levant. Lorenzo de' Medici knew that such economic warfare, if unchecked, could cripple Florence's prosperity. Direct confrontation was not an option. Venice's fleet was superior, and a trade war would hurt Florence as much as Venice. Lorenzo suspected a deeper motivation, a specific grievance, or a hidden strategic shift that was driving Venice's actions. Brother Anselm was tasked with uncovering the true reason behind Venice's aggressive trade policies. He was not to travel to Venice, which would have been too conspicuous for a cloistered monk. Instead, his mission was to intercept and analyze the flow of information that passed through Florence, specifically focusing on diplomatic pouches and the correspondence of Venetian envoys stationed in the city. The Florentine post routes were tightly controlled by the Medici, allowing them to discreetly monitor key communications. The challenge lay in the sheer volume of documents and the subtle nature of the information. Anselm could not simply read official letters, they would be deliberately misleading. He needed to find the crumbs, the inconsistencies, the hidden narratives within the seemingly mundane. He established a secure, clandestine workspace within a rarely used annex of the monastery library, a space known only to Lorenzo and a single trusted aide. Diplomatic dispatches, intercepted merchant letters, and even private correspondence of influential Venetian residents in Florence were brought to him under the cloak of night. Anselm began his meticulous work. He spent weeks poring over thousands of documents, his quill scratching notes in a personal cipher known only to him. He analyzed not just the content of letters, but their handwriting, the quality of the paper, the specific wax seals used, and even the subtle scent of the parchment, searching for anomalies. He looked for patterns in the seemingly random travel itineraries of Venetian officials, for repeated phrases in different documents, for unusual recipients of letters that seemed unrelated. He noticed that certain seemingly innocuous letters from Venetian merchants mentioned specific dates and locations of shipbuilding activities, details that seemed out of place in mere trade discussions. He cross-referenced these with intelligence reports from Florentine agents in coastal cities, noting that the Venetian shipbuilding efforts were far exceeding their normal repairs and replacements. The breakthrough came when Anselm discovered a series of seemingly unrelated notes from a Venetian banker to his Florentine correspondent. The notes discussed large, unusual deposits being made into specific accounts tied to a network of privateers operating in the Aegean Sea. These privateers, while officially independent, had a known, albeit unspoken, connection to the Venetian Doge's office. Anselm noticed that the dates of these deposits coincided precisely with increases in the Florentine tariffs in Venice. He also found a recurring, almost obsessive reference in the Venetian banker's letters to the grain shortage, a veiled term he suspected referred to a severe drought in Venetian-controlled territories in Dalmatia and the Morea. Anselm synthesized his findings. The Venetian Republic was not simply trying to assert dominance over trade. They were facing a critical grain shortage in their eastern territories, and they needed to secure new, reliable sources of food. Rather than directly confronting Florence, a move that could lead to open war and further disrupt vital supply lines, Venice was quietly commissioning privateers to disrupt Florentine shipping in the Aegean. The increased tariffs and bureaucratic delays were a smokescreen, designed to pressure Florence into seeking an accommodation, specifically a trade agreement that would include large shipments of Florentine grain in exchange for relaxed trade restrictions. The privateer activity was a subtle, deniable form of coercion. Anselm's meticulous report detailed this hidden Venetian strategy, explaining the nexus between the grain shortage, the privateer activity, and the trade restrictions. He even suggested a list of potential Florentine grain merchants who might be approached for secret negotiations. His analysis was presented to Lorenzo, who marveled at the depth of insight. Armed with this crucial intelligence, Lorenzo de' Medici did not retaliate with military force or escalate the trade war. Instead, he initiated discreet diplomatic channels, offering Venice a generous supply of Florentine grain at favorable terms, a move that stunned the Venetian Senate. In return, the tariffs were quietly lifted and the bureaucratic hurdles vanished. The privateer activity in the Aegean ceased, and Florentine trade with the East resumed its normal flow. Brother Anselm returned to his quiet life of prayer and study, his role in averting a potential economic disaster known only to a select few. The silent scribe had spoken truths more powerful than any army. Number 5. Niccolo the Chameleon Ricci. Niccolo Ricci was a ghost. He could be a street urchin begging for scraps one moment, a haughty noble in a feathered cap the next. He spoke with the accents of Rome, Venice, and Naples, his eyes shifting, his posture changing, his very essence adapting to blend seamlessly into any environment. Born an orphan on the rough streets of Florence, Niccolo had learned the art of survival through mimicry and observation. His uncanny ability to assume new identities, coupled with a quick mind and nimble fingers, made him the Medici's premier infiltrator and information extractor. He was not a fighter by nature, but he could disarm a guard with a smile or steal a document from a locked desk without a sound. His most perilous mission involved the infamous Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia. The Borgia Pope, known for his ambition, ruthlessness, and vast network of spies, was a constant threat to Florence's independence and the Medici's influence in Italy. In the early 1490s, intelligence reached Lorenzo de' Medici about a plot to secure a crucial papal bull, a document of immense religious and political authority that would grant significant lands in Romagna bordering Florentine territory to Cesare Borgia, the Pope's son. This move would greatly expand Borgia power right on Florence's doorstep, creating a formidable rival and potentially cutting off vital trade routes to the south. The bull was rumored to be hidden within the innermost sanctum of the Vatican archives, a place guarded with fanatical devotion and layers of security. Lorenzo's orders to Niccolo were chillingly simple: find the bull, confirm its contents, and if possible, secure a copy or somehow invalidate it. Infiltrating the Vatican, particularly the personal archives of the Pope, was a task considered suicidal by many. Niccolo accepted without hesitation. He first spent weeks studying the patterns of life within the Vatican, observing the various factions, the guards, the clergy, and the servants. He learned the roots of the Swiss Guard, the habits of the papal scribes, and the daily routines of the cardinals. His chosen persona was that of a disgraced zealous cleric, Brother Anselmo, seeking to dedicate himself to the Pope's service after a false accusation. He presented himself as a humble, pious man, burdened by an unfair past, but eager to prove his devotion. He subtly cultivated a reputation for tireless work and unquestioning obedience. He spent months performing menial tasks within the Vatican library, copying documents and arranging ancient texts, slowly gaining the trust of the head archivist, a suspicious and reclusive man named Father Benedetto. Niccolo observed that Father Benedetto had a peculiar habit. He suffered from severe insomnia and often worked late into the night, relying on a potent herbal sedative to finally achieve sleep. The sedative, however, left him disoriented for a short period after he woke. Niccolo also noticed that Benedetto kept a unique, intricately carved key on a chain around his neck, a key he believed was for the section of the archives rumored to hold the most sensitive documents. One night, after weeks of careful planning, Niccolo put his plan into motion. He had subtly gained access to Benedetto's quarters and had managed to replace Benedetto's regular sedative with a slightly altered dose, one that would induce a deeper, more prolonged disoriented state upon waking. He also arranged for a minor but distracting incident to occur in another part of the Vatican just after midnight, pulling away most of the night guards. As the Vatican fell silent, Niccolo, disguised in a simple dark cassock, slipped into Benedetto's quarters. He found the archivist in a deep, unnatural sleep, still disoriented from the altered sedative. With silent practice movements, Niccolo carefully removed the key from Benedetto's neck. He knew he had limited time. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the archive, his heart a steady drum against his ribs. The silence of the vast, echoing halls was broken only by the rustle of his robes. He located the specific section Benedetto had frequented, the one believed to hold the Borgia family's private documents. The lock was ancient, but the key turned smoothly. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old parchment. Niccolo systematically searched the meticulously organized shelves. He ignored the vast majority of religious texts, focusing on the hidden compartments and disguised drawers Benedetto had sometimes accessed. His fingers brushed against a false bottom in a large oak chest, a hidden mechanism revealing a small, iron-bound casket. Inside, nestled amongst other Borgia family papers, was the papal bull. Its ornate script and papal seal confirmed its authenticity. It indeed detailed the granting of the Romagna lands to Cesare. Niccolo did not attempt to steal the original. That would be too risky and immediately traceable. Instead, he meticulously created a precise, high-quality copy. He carried with him a small kit of prepared parchment, inks, and a pre-made wax seal, carefully crafted weeks earlier to mimic the exact texture and subtle imperfections of a genuine papal bull. His hands, usually deft for pickpocketing, now moved with the delicate precision of a master calligrapher. He copied the entire document, every flourish, every Latin phrase, every subtle indentation of the papal seal. It took hours. He even managed to subtly alter a single, obscure legal clause in the original that, if unnoticed, could later be used to challenge the bull's legality, a tiny seed of potential invalidation. He returned the key to Benedetto's neck, replaced the altered sedative with the original, and melted back into the shadows just as the first rays of dawn touched the Vatican walls. Later that day, Benedetto awoke, disoriented, but dismissing it as another bout of insomnia. He noticed nothing amiss. Niccolo, once again the unassuming cleric, slipped out of Rome days later, the expertly crafted copy of the bull hidden in the lining of his worn tunic. The copy, presented to Lorenzo de' Medici, provided irrefutable proof of Borgia's ambitions. More importantly, it allowed Florentine legal scholars, aware of the subtly altered clause, to prepare their arguments. Florence, armed with this foreknowledge, could then strategically counter Borgia's moves, either through diplomatic pressure or by preparing alliances to challenge the bull's legitimacy once it was publicly announced. Niccolo Ricci, the chameleon, had exposed a dangerous secret, and in doing so, he had given Florence the precious gift of foresight, ensuring that Medici could anticipate and neutralize a grave threat without openly defying the papal authority. Number 4. Isabella the Nightingale Moretti. Isabella Moretti's voice was her weapon, a liquid silver cascade that could soothe the most savage heart or stir the deepest passions. A renowned singer and lutenist, her fame had spread throughout the courts of Europe. Her performances were sought after by kings, dukes, and popes, granting her access to the most private chambers, the most intimate conversations, and the most unguarded moments. While her audiences were captivated by her melodies, Isabella was busy weaving a different kind of magic, one of observation and memory. She saw the flickers of fear in a monarch's eyes, the subtle tensions between courtiers, the unguarded remarks made over a goblet of wine. For the Medici, Isabella was their ears and eyes in places no spy could overtly reach. Her most audacious mission took her to the opulent, yet politically treacherous, court of King Charles VIII of France in the early 1490s. Rumors, vague but persistent, had reached Florence that Charles was contemplating an invasion of Italy, driven by his claim to the Kingdom of Naples. Such an invasion would shatter the delicate balance of power that Lorenzo de' Medici had painstakingly constructed, plunging the peninsula into devastating warfare and directly threatening Florence's independence and prosperity. The exact timing, the proposed route, and the true motivations behind such a monumental undertaking remained shrouded in secrecy within the French court. Lorenzo's command to Isabella was clear. Discover the truth about Charles VIII's intentions. Was the invasion truly planned, or was it mere bluster? If so, when and where? Isabella arrived in France under the pretense of a royal invitation to perform for the young King Charles, who was known for his love of Italian culture. She brought with her a small retinue of Florentine musicians and servants, all carefully selected for their loyalty and discretion. Once at court, Isabella charmed everyone. She sang at banquets, entertained in private chambers, and even accompanied the queen on her evening walks. She observed the courtiers, the flow of information, the subtle shifts in mood. She noted the king's fascination with ancient Roman military campaigns and his advisors' discussions about logistics and supply lines, discussions that seemed far too detailed for mere academic interest. She recognized the presence of military engineers and cartographers working feverishly on new maps, their faces often etched with fatigue. And Isabella paid particular attention to Louis de la Tremoille, a prominent military commander and one of Charles's closest confidants. He was known to be a passionate man, easily swayed by flattery and a good vintage. During a late-night performance in the king's private study, Isabella played a haunting melody on her lute, a piece she knew was one of La Tremoille's favorites. After the king retired, La Tremoille remained captivated by her music and perhaps by Isabella herself. She subtly steered the conversation to the grand narratives of history, to the glory of ancient empires, and the weight of legacy. She spoke of the courage it took to embark on monumental endeavors and the importance of timing. She praised La Tremoille's strategic mind, subtly hinting that only a commander of his caliber could truly appreciate the complexities of a grand military undertaking. Flattered and relaxed by the wine and Isabella's enchanting presence, La Tremoille began to speak in broader terms, not directly revealing secrets, but hinting at the scale of the king's ambition. He spoke of the destiny of France to reclaim its ancient glory, of a path through the Alps, and of a crossing that would shake Italy to its foundations. Isabella, with her eidetic memory, absorbed every word, every nuance. She noticed a specific, frequently used phrase La Tremoille used: "The autumn winds will carry us." This phrase, repeated in different contexts, became a key. She then shifted her attention to the king's personal astrologer, a nervous man known for his superstition and his reliance on omens. Isabella, during a performance in the royal chapel, deliberately dropped a specific type of rare foreign coin, a coin she knew the astrologer would recognize as a symbol of passage. She then subtly guided a conversation with him about the significance of specific astrological alignments that would be most favorable for a journey, particularly a journey south. She asked about the fortuitous alignment of Mars and Jupiter in the autumn sky, a deliberate hint. The astrologer, eager to impress and interpret, began to discuss the ideal timing for a major undertaking, focusing on the very dates Isabella had subtly suggested, confirming her suspicions about the timing of the invasion. Her most crucial discovery came from an unexpected source. While practicing a new piece in a secluded garden, Isabella overheard a heated argument between two royal architects. They were discussing the challenges of transporting siege engines over specific mountain passes that were clearly in the Alps and pointed directly towards Italy. One architect, frustrated, blurted out, "It must be ready by the Feast of St. Michael, or we risk missing the crossing window." The Feast of St. Michael fell in late September. The autumn winds and crossing window now made perfect sense. Isabella meticulously compiled her observations. The king was indeed planning an invasion of Italy. The primary objective was Naples, but the route would necessitate passage through Florence. The preparations were far advanced, and the invasion was set to commence in late September or early October, coinciding with the Feast of St. Michael. She encoded this critical intelligence into a musical score, using specific notes and melodic patterns to represent dates, troop movements, and key personalities. The score was then ostensibly sent to Lorenzo de' Medici as a new composition for his personal enjoyment. Upon receiving Isabella's coded score, Lorenzo immediately understood the gravity of the situation. He recognized the impending threat and was able to begin discreetly preparing Florence's defenses, shoring up alliances, and negotiating terms with other Italian states. When Charles VIII's formidable army eventually crossed the Alps in September 1494, sweeping through Italy, Florence, unlike many other states, was not caught entirely off guard. Thanks to Isabella the Nightingale Moretti, the Medici had heard the ominous tune of war long before it played its first devastating note. Her song had saved Florence from an ambush. Number 3, Giovanni the Shadow Merchant Bianchi. Giovanni Bianchi was outwardly a successful textile merchant from Florence, his warehouses brimming with fine silks, richly dyed wools, and intricate brocades. He traveled extensively, his caravans laden with goods moving across the Alps into France and Germany, and south into the Papal States and Naples. He was known for his sharp business acumen, his affable manner, and his remarkable memory for prices and market trends. But beneath the veneer of commerce lay a profound understanding of routes, logistics, and the flow of information. Giovanni's true cargo was not always cloth. It was often intelligence collected silently and delivered with impeccable timing. He mapped the political landscape through the economic veins of the land, understanding that power followed trade. His most complex and dangerous mission involved the powerful Sforza Duchy of Milan, ruled by the cunning Ludovico il Moro Sforza. In the early 1490s, Ludovico, despite a fragile alliance with Florence, was increasingly seen as a volatile and unpredictable force, constantly shifting allegiances to serve his own ambitions. Intelligence indicated that Ludovico was secretly amassing a vast arsenal of advanced weaponry, including new designs for artillery and siege engines, far exceeding the defensive needs of Milan. More alarmingly, rumors suggested he was negotiating with foreign powers, potentially France, for military assistance. Lorenzo de' Medici understood that such a military buildup, combined with foreign intervention, could upset the entire Italian balance and pose an existential threat to Florence. Lorenzo tasked Giovanni with a nearly impossible objective: ascertain the true scale of Milan's military preparations, identify their secret suppliers, and confirm if Ludovico was indeed inviting a foreign power onto Italian soil. Direct infiltration of Milanese armories was impossible. Giovanni's approach had to be far more subtle. Giovanni expanded his textile trade routes to include Milanese territories, increasing his dealings with various suppliers, artisans, and merchants connected to the Sforza court. He established new lines of credit and engaged in large, seemingly innocuous transactions. He made sure to visit the smaller towns and villages on the periphery of Milan, places where raw materials were sourced and lesser-known workshops operated. He developed a keen eye for discrepancies. He noticed that the demand for specific metals, high-quality iron, copper, and tin far, outstripped what was needed for civilian industries. He observed unusual movements of skilled artisans, metalworkers, and engineers, many of whom seemed to disappear into secretive workshops in the countryside. He paid attention to the seemingly trivial, the specific types of timber being transported, the increased demand for specialized tools, the quiet chatter in taverns about new commissions from the Duke. Giovanni cultivated a network of informants through seemingly innocent business dealings. He would offer generous payments for large orders of textiles, then casually inquire about the local economy, the major patrons, and any new developments. He would lament the difficulty of finding good transport for his goods, subtly probing about the availability of wagons and drivers, gauging the demands on Milan's logistical infrastructure. He discovered that a significant portion of Milan's transport capacity was being diverted for unspecified military exercises in remote northern regions. The breakthrough came when Giovanni secured a contract to supply specialized canvas for the Milanese army. This allowed him access, albeit limited, to their quartermasters and supply depots. While ostensibly discussing fabric quality, he would meticulously observe the other materials being moved, the volume of gunpowder, the size of cannonballs, the design of new cannon carriages. He noticed that some of the timber used for these carriages bore specific markings he recognized from forests in the Swiss cantons. This suggested foreign supply lines, hinting at external alliances. He also cultivated a relationship with a disgruntled Milanese artisan, a master blacksmith, who was bitter about unpaid wages. Giovanni, under the guise of commissioning a custom metalwork piece, gently extracted information about the designs of new artillery pieces being forged in secret workshops, describing them as larger and more devastating than anything seen before. The blacksmith, fueled by grievance and a desire for extra coin, even sketched out some of the basic components for Giovanni on a piece of scrap parchment, thinking it was for a decorative pattern. The final piece of the puzzle came from a chance encounter Giovanni orchestrated with a minor Milanese diplomat in a Venetian trading post. The diplomat, celebrating a successful negotiation, became boastful and, after several glasses of wine, spoke carelessly about Milan's powerful new friends from across the mountains, who would soon bring order to Italy. The diplomat specifically mentioned a large payment being made to a Swiss mercenary captain and a new agreement for French military passage through Savoy. Giovanni painstakingly compiled his intelligence. And Milan was not only building a massive offensive military machine, but Ludovico was actively paying for Swiss mercenaries and negotiating passage for French forces, effectively inviting Charles VIII onto Italian soil. The scale of the preparations, the new artillery, the sheer logistics involved, pointed to an invasion, not just a defensive measure. He understood that Ludovico's true ambition was to use France to depose the King of Naples and reshape Italy, potentially leaving Florence vulnerable. Giovanni did not send a written report. That would be too risky. Instead, he meticulously memorized every detail, every number, every route. He sent a single, seemingly innocent merchant caravan back to Florence, carrying nothing but a consignment of expensive Milanese silks. Hidden within the silk bales, known only to Giovanni, was a unique pattern of threads, a prearranged visual code that, when interpreted by Lorenzo's cryptographer, Marco Valerius, would confirm the urgency and gravity of his findings. Upon his return to Florence, Giovanni delivered a private verbal report to Lorenzo de' Medici. He described the scale of the military buildup, the advanced artillery designs, the specific Swiss and French connections, and Ludovico's clear intention to destabilize Italy. Lorenzo, sobered by the detailed intelligence, began to prepare Florence for the coming storm, understanding that Ludovico's treachery meant war was inevitable. Giovanni the shadow merchant Bianchi had revealed the true nature of Milan's ambition, providing Florence with precious time to prepare for the invasion that would ultimately reshape the entire Italian peninsula. His caravans had carried a truth heavier than any gold. Number 2. Marco the Quill Valerius. Marco Valerius lived a life of quiet intensity, surrounded by books and the faint scent of ink. He was not a man of action or disguise, but of intellect and meticulous detail. A former monastic scribe with an unparalleled talent for languages and calligraphy, Marco possessed a mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos and meaning in the most obscure ciphers. Lorenzo de' Medici recognized in him a genius for cryptography, forgery, and the subtle art of misdirection through documentation. Marco the Quill was the Medici's master of secrets, not of gathering them in the field, but of unlocking them from intercepted messages and crafting false ones that could turn the tide of political fortunes. His most intricate mission took place during the escalating tensions with Siena in the mid-1480s. Siena, a historically independent republic, maintained a precarious balance between Florence and the Papal States. Recent intelligence indicated that a powerful Sienese merchant family, the Piccolomini, with strong ties to Rome and known anti-Medici sentiments, was orchestrating a subtle campaign to undermine Florentine influence. More specifically, reports hinted at a secret plot to divert key trade routes and forge a military alliance with Naples, aimed at encircling Florentine interests in southern Tuscany. The precise nature of this plot, however, remained elusive, hidden within a sophisticated cipher system. Lorenzo de' Medici tasked Marco with intercepting and decrypting the communications of the Piccolomini family and their Neapolitan contacts. He particularly sought to uncover the specific details of their proposed alliance and any hidden clauses that might severely impact Florence. The challenge was immense. The Piccolomini cipher was rumored to be a complex polyalphabetic substitution, changing keys frequently, combined with a seemingly random numerical overlay. Marco set up his clandestine workshop in a hidden chamber beneath the Medici palace, a place secured against prying eyes and ears. Intercepted correspondence procured through Florentine postmasters and discreet agents arrived almost daily. These were mostly seemingly innocuous business letters, filled with references to wool prices, olive oil harvests, and shipping schedules, but Marco knew the real messages lay buried within. He began by meticulously cataloging every symbol, every letter, and every number. He studied the frequency of common Latin and Italian letters within the coded text, searching for patterns that could hint at the underlying language. He painstakingly compared multiple intercepted messages, even seemingly unrelated ones, looking for repeated sequences. He noted that certain names and places appeared in a particular disguised form. He spent weeks poring over the documents, his quill meticulously transcribing every symbol onto a massive grid, his mind a whirlwind of permutations and combinations. The breakthrough came when Marco intercepted a coded letter from a Piccolomini agent in Naples to a contact in Siena. The letter, unusually long, began with a flowery, almost poetic salutation that seemed overly elaborate for a business communication. Marco noticed that the first few words of this salutation, when subjected to a specific simple substitution cipher, yielded a familiar Latin phrase, one known to be a favored motto of an ancient Roman general. He suspected this might be the key, or at least a part of it. He hypothesized that the key to the polyalphabetic cipher was derived from a famous historical text, a common practice among educated elites. He then began cross-referencing the unusual numerical overlays. He noticed that the numbers often corresponded to specific lines or words in particular texts. He tried the Bible, classical poetry, and prominent philosophical works, all to no avail. Finally, a flash of insight struck him. The Piccolomini family, despite their outward piety, were known for their fascination with obscure, esoteric works. Marco remembered an ancient treatise on military strategy, a rare manuscript known to be in the private collection of a Florentine scholar who had once tutored a young Piccolomini. He acquired a copy of the obscure military treatise. He then meticulously applied the supposed motto key, combined with the line and word counts derived from the numerical overlay, to the intercepted Neapolitan letter. Slowly, painstakingly, the jumbled symbols began to resolve into intelligible Italian. The message revealed a detailed plan. The Piccolomini family, aided by Neapolitan funds, was indeed bribing key Sienese officials to redirect lucrative wool and grain trade routes away from Florence and towards Naples. Furthermore, they were orchestrating a series of border skirmishes designed to provoke Florence into military action, which would then trigger a prearranged military alliance between Siena and Naples, isolating Florence and forcing concessions. The plan was chilling in its precision. But Marco's mission was not complete. Lorenzo needed to not only know the plot, but also to disrupt it without revealing that Florentine intelligence had broken the Sienese cipher. Marco was then tasked with crafting a disinformation campaign. He forged several letters, ostensibly from the Piccolomini family, to their Sienese contacts, but subtly altered. These forged letters, meticulously crafted to mimic the exact handwriting, paper, and ink of genuine Piccolomini correspondence, contained strategically placed errors within the cipher, subtle misdirections that would lead the Sienese to believe their alliance was with a powerful, but ultimately unstable, Neapolitan faction. He introduced false information about troop movements and supply routes that would confuse the Sienese military strategists. These forged letters were then allowed to fall into the wrong hands through a controlled leak to the Sienese intelligence network, which was known to have double agents. The Sienese, relying on their broken cipher and the supposedly authentic Piccolomini messages, began to shift their resources based on Marco's deliberate misdirection. They deployed troops to the wrong borders, expected supplies from non-existent sources, and prepared for military engagements that would never occur. The impact was immediate. The Sienese plans for trade disruption and military alliance faltered. The border skirmishes became uncoordinated and ineffective. The Neapolitan allies, confused by the lack of follow-through from Siena and receiving their own contradictory reports from their Sienese contacts, began to question the reliability of the Piccolomini family. The planned alliance crumbled before it could even be formalized. The Piccolomini family, discredited and facing internal dissent within Siena, lost their influence. Florence, never having to declare war, quietly secured its trade routes and maintained its strategic position. Marco the Quill Valerius, in his quiet chamber, had waged a war of whispers and ink, and Florence had emerged victorious without firing a single shot, all because of the careful unraveling of a coded secret and the masterful crafting of a strategic deception. Number 1. Alessandra the Silken Whisperer, Rossi. Alessandra Rossi was not just a woman of extraordinary beauty. She possessed a mind sharper than any Florentine blade, and a will as unyielding as the Arno's current. Once a celebrated courtesan, she had navigated the treacherous waters of courtly intrigue with grace and cunning, learning the subtle art of influence and the power of a well-placed word. Lorenzo de' Medici, ever the visionary, saw beyond her public persona and recognized her unparalleled ability to extract information without force, to manipulate events with a smile, and to inspire devotion and trust in those she sought to influence. Alessandra the Silken Whisperer was the Medici's ultimate social agent, their silent architect of alliances and dismantler of enmities. Her most critical mission, one that would redefine the power balance of Italy, took place in Rome during the tumultuous years surrounding the papal election of 1484. The death of Pope Sixtus IV, a staunch enemy of Florence and a key instigator of the Pazzi conspiracy, left a power vacuum and plunged the Papal States into uncertainty. The College of Cardinals, deeply fractured by internal rivalries and external pressures from various Italian powers, struggled to elect a successor. Florence's greatest fear was the election of another anti-Medici pope, or worse, a pope beholden to Venice or Naples, either of which would gravely threaten Florentine security and influence. Lorenzo de' Medici needed a pope who was at least neutral, ideally sympathetic to Florentine interests. The strongest candidate emerging from the initial ballots was Cardinal Giovanni Battista Cybo, a man of considerable influence but also known for his unpredictability and his previous leanings towards Naples. A direct approach by Florentine envoys would be too overt, potentially alienating other cardinals. Lorenzo needed someone who could subtly sway the College of Cardinals, not through threats or bribes, but through a masterful understanding of human nature and the art of persuasion. Alessandra was the only choice. Alessandra arrived in Rome under the guise of an affluent widow seeking spiritual solace after a recent loss, her reputation as a patron of arts providing the perfect cover. She immediately immersed herself in the social life of the Roman aristocracy in the inner circles of the Vatican. She established a salon, a place where cardinals, diplomats, and influential figures gathered to discuss philosophy, art, and the pressing matters of the day. Her salon became a hub of information, a place where whispers were exchanged and allegiances subtly probed. She quickly identified the key players: Cardinal Cybo himself, of course, Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere, a formidable and ambitious figure who was Cybo's rival, but also a potential ally against common enemies, and Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, whose vast wealth and network of contacts made him a dangerous, unpredictable force. Alessandra understood that direct lobbying would fail. She needed to subtly shift perceptions, to gently guide conversations, and to make the cardinals believe that supporting Cybo was not just beneficial for Florence, but for their own individual ambitions and the stability of the church. Alessandra focused her efforts on creating a perception of Cybo as a unifying figure, one who could bring peace to Italy after Sixtus's aggressive papacy. She subtly introduced conversations about the exhaustion of war, the desire for stability, and the need for a pope who prioritized the spiritual well-being of Christendom over temporal power struggles. She allowed these ideas to spread through her salon, letting others voice them as their own. Her most cunning maneuver involved Cardinal della Rovere. She knew he resented Cybo, but also held a deep distrust of Borgia. Alessandra began to discreetly emphasize Borgia's ambition and his potential ruthlessness, speaking of past incidents of Borgia's Machiavellian tactics in hushed tones, framing them as concerns for the church's future. She would lament, in seemingly innocent conversations, the potential for discord and instability if Borgia gained too much power. This subtly pushed della Rovere to reconsider his opposition to Cybo, seeing Cybo as the lesser of two evils, a more predictable choice than Borgia, and a potential counterweight to Borgia's growing influence. She even arranged for a series of chance meetings between Cybo and della Rovere at her salon, ensuring they were in an environment conducive to private, conciliatory discussions. She also discreetly played upon the cardinal's personal weaknesses and desires. To some, she spoke of Cybo's quiet appreciation for classical learning, knowing they sought patronage. To others, she hinted at Cybo's pragmatic approach to financial matters, knowing their concern for the church's depleted coffers. She never promised anything directly, but allowed the cardinals to infer that their own interests would be well served by Cybo's ascension. She created an illusion of consensus, making each cardinal feel that others were already leaning towards Cybo, thereby reducing their resistance. As the conclave dragged on, Alessandra intensified her efforts. She ensured that positive news and flattering rumors about Cybo's character and intentions circulated freely amongst the cardinal's staff and the wider Roman elite. She strategically leaked carefully crafted letters purportedly from influential figures in Florence, expressing cautious optimism about Cybo's potential for peace and stability, subtly reassuring the cardinals that Florence, a key power, would support a Cybo papacy. These letters, although subtle, carried significant weight. The turning point came after weeks of deadlock. Cardinal della Rovere, persuaded that Cybo offered the best chance for stability and a check on Borgia, shifted his crucial block of votes. Other cardinals, sensing the momentum and influenced by the widespread belief that Cybo was the pragmatic and unifying choice, followed suit. On August 29, 1484, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Cybo was elected Pope Innocent VIII. The immediate aftermath saw a complete shift in papal foreign policy. Pope Innocent VIII, indebted to Florence for their subtle support during his election and keen to establish stability, quickly pursued a policy of détente with the Medici. He granted Lorenzo de' Medici's son, Giovanni, a cardinalate at the tender age of 13, a move that solidified Medici influence within the Vatican for decades to come. He also initiated a series of alliances that benefited Florence, protecting their trade and political interests. Alessandra, the silken whisper Rossi, having woven her web of influence, quietly departed Rome, leaving behind a papacy aligned with Florence, a testament to her mastery of human connection and the silent, profound power of a whispered word. She had changed the course of history without ever raising her voice in argument, her impact felt, yet unseen, a true testament to the invisible hand of the Medici.